So yesterday we saw how you can use the online Desmos calculator to graph quadratic equations. Today we're going to use it to solve quadratic equations. But before we solve one, let's take a look at it like a problem that we did yesterday. Here's my equation, y equals x squared minus 2x minus 3. I got a graph over, and I went ahead and graphed it on the right-hand side. Okay, I'm going to look at the x-intercepts. So the x-intercepts are -1, 0, and 3, 0. Okay? Remember, when you write a point, it's always in the form x comma y. So my x values are -1 and 3. Notice the y value on both of these points is 0. So let's substitute 0 into this equation for y. So we get 0 equals x squared minus 2x minus 3. Well, before we were using the graphing calculator, we were solving quadratic equations like this, what I have written in blue, by factoring. So let's solve this equation that I have written here in blue by factoring. So you want to get everything on one side and one side equal to 0. And we have that. So now we want to try to factor this side. Well, this side is a quadratic trinomial, so it's going to be easy to factor because we have a leading coefficient of 1. So what we do is we ask ourselves, what two numbers multiply to be -3 and add to be -2? Well, the two numbers are -3 and +1. They multiply to be -3, they add to be -2. So the factors are the quantity x minus 3 and x plus 1. Now we're trying to solve it. So remember, the next step to the solving process is to set the factors equal to 0. So the solutions are -3 and -1. But this should have been not -3, +3, right? Because I need to add 3 to both sides. So the solutions are 3 and -1. Look, those are my x-intercepts. My x-intercepts were 3 and -1. Those are the solutions. So this is another method for solving quadratic equations. You can graph it and find the x-intercepts. These are called the zeros. They're called the zeros because those are the values that makes the y equal to 0. We also refer to them as the roots or the solutions. So zeros, solutions, roots, they all mean the same thing. They're the x-intercepts. So this is another method that we're going to use today to solve quadratic equations. So you're going to be using Desmos again. Alright? So, let's take a look at this example.
Mary McCammon to the main office or call extension 8000. Mary McCammon to the main office or call extension 8000.
Says to solve by graphing. Okay? So the first step, if you want to solve this by graphing, is to get it in standard form. What I mean by standard form is I want everything on one side and the other side being 0. And you usually try to get your quadratic term to be positive. And that's what we have. My quadratic term is positive. Everything is on the left side. The right-hand side is 0. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the 0 with the variable y. So I'm going to rewrite this equation as y equals 2x squared plus 9x minus 5. And then I'm going to go to Desmos and graph it. Where does it cross the x-axis? Crosses at x equals -5 and x equals 1/2. So these are the solutions. We're done. The answers, the roots, the zeros are -5 and x equals 1/2. I could have solved this one by factoring, Let's just do this one by factoring, but you don't have to do it by factoring, because today I want you to just use Desmos. But I want to show you why this works, okay? Plus, it's a good review of factoring. So we got 2x squared plus 9x minus 5 is equal to 0. So we're going to have to use the slip and slide method. So we're going to take this 2 and slide it to the back, or slip it to the back. So then we get x squared plus 9x. And when I slip that 2 to the back and multiply by the negative 5, I get negative 10 is equal to 0. So now I'm going to try to factor this since I have a leading coefficient of 1. I got to find two numbers that multiply to be negative 10 and add to be 9. So the two numbers are positive 10 and negative 1. And the method that we're using is called slip and slide. Some of you were forgetting to do this step. Once you slip your 2 to the back, now you got to slide your 2 back into your answer. And then 10 over 2 reduces down to 5. Okay, 1/2 can't be reduced, but we don't want to leave the fraction, right? So we move the 2 up here. So we get 2x minus 1 equals 0. And then set both of these equal to 0 and solve. And if you take both of these expressions and set them equal to 0, you get x equals negative 5 and x equals 1/2, which we got really quick by just graphing it and seeing where it intersects, the x-intercepts. All right, let's try another one. So here's my equation. X squared minus 2x minus 1. I want to solve it by graphing. So my first step is to get it in standard form. Again, this is the standard form. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So I'm going to take the negative 2x and add it to both sides. So I'm going to add 2x to both sides. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. These cancel out. On this side we got 0. And over here we add up our like terms. Well, we don't have any like terms, so we're just going to rewrite it as x squared plus 2x plus 1. Now, replace the 0 with a y and graph it. So we want to graph this equation here. Y equals x squared plus 2x plus 1. Where does it cross the x-axis? It crosses at the negative 1. So the solution to this quadratic equation is negative 1. But I thought quadratic equations are supposed to have 2 solutions, or 2 roots. But this one only has 1. But it actually does have 2. Let me show you why it has 2. So to show you why it has 2, I'm going to solve this by graphing. Okay? I'm going to get rid of the y here. And I'm going to factor this. I got a leading coefficient of 1. So I got to find 2 numbers that multiply to be 1 and add to be 2. So the 2 numbers are positive 1 and positive 1. So what are the 2 solutions? The 2 solutions are x equals negative 1 and x equals negative 1. It has 2 solutions, it just happens that the 2 solutions are the same number. So this equation has 1 solution, x equals negative 1, but it really has 2. Okay? All right, one more example. I want to solve this equation by graphing. 2x squared plus 5x equals negative 7. So our first step is going to be to add 7 to both sides. Now I have 2x squared plus 5x plus 7 is equal to 0. Replace the 0 with a y and then graph it. So here's my graph. Here's the x-axis. Where does the graph cross the x-axis? It doesn't. So this has a solution. It's just we can't find it. It's not a real solution. Okay? So what we would do, we would write, it has, the solution to this quadratic equation is no real solution. Or you can write no real root. It has no real root. has no real solution. Because if we try to do this by factoring, we couldn't do it. Let's see. Watch why you can't do it by factoring. So let's do slip and slide. Slip the 2 to the back. We got x squared plus 5x plus 14 is equal to 0. Okay? I got a leading coefficient of 1. So I'm going to have to factor this. Try to. I'll put x and x down. What two numbers multiply to be positive 14 and add to be 5? Well, factors of 14 are 1 and 14 and 2 and 7. Or you could do negative 1 and negative 14, negative 2 and negative 7. Do any of these combinations give you 5? Nope, this gives me 15, this gives me 15, this one gives me 9, this one gives me negative 15, that gives me negative 9. I can't get positive 5, so I can't factor it. So we're going to learn how to solve this. There's other methods that we're going to be learning. One you're probably pretty familiar with from Algebra 1 is called the quadratic formula. So that's what we're going to be doing after Thanksgiving break. So again, the solution to this is there is no real solution. Or you can say there is no real root.